This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, hi, everybody. Just welcome all of your perceptions choicelessly as they arise from moment to moment in your awareness. See that some of those perceptions are new, whereas others are very familiar to you, like old acquaintances who are paying you a visit on regular intervals. These return customers are the ones with which we tend to identify. Not the ones that show up once and never show up again. These customers are not good candidates for identification. So you see that there is a tendency, once you minimize your activity, in other words, once you drop all goals, all end gaining, at least for the duration of this experiment, there is a tendency for these return customers, old acquaintances to show up. A mistake would be to think that we have to change those perceptions, that we have to get rid of them, or that in the future, if we are good enough, they are not going to show up again. Rather, what is important is to become even more acquainted with them, meaning they have been around for a long time. But did we look really closely at them? Did we ask the question, where are they? How far do they extend in the body? How do they move, they switch from one to another? How are they different from the ones that show up only once and never to return? See that they are not essentially different from those. After all, they are all bodily sensations. See also that they are not essentially different from external sense perceptions like a sound, a word I say, a thought that crosses your mind. Accept that they return in a kind of stubborn way as a false safe state of your body. They are, for the most part, natural perceptions. So it is essential to notice that they are totally unrelated to your happiness, well-being, peace, or lack thereof. That they are essentially neutral in this regard. If you feel the slightest aggravation towards them, observe this aggravation. Allow for it to settle. That can be achieved by kind of surrendering the sensation that aggravates you, that seems to aggravate you, meaning which has an unpleasant quality to it, by releasing the sensation to the space that surrounds it, out of which it arises or seems to arise. So that it can blend with this space and not stick out any longer. Just as if we look at a wave in isolation, the wave seems to be separate from the ocean. But if we try to look at the edges of the wave, we notice that the wave has no edges and blends with the ocean. The edges of the wave were simply made up by our imagination. They didn't exist in our experience, actual experience of the wave. In this way, the wave is allowed to go back to the ocean. The tree goes back to the forest. And those isolated, seemingly isolated perceptions go back to the totality of our experience. And when I say go back, it's not really something that happens. Just as the wave has always been the sea, never existed separate from it. These perceptions have always been this awareness and never existed separate from it. The mistake most of philosophy makes, modern philosophy, and also to some extent neuroscience makes, is the following. There is a belief that our experience is in fact fragmentary, that it is made of fragments. And that in hindsight, an operation of the mind sees it as a whole, unifies it. Whereas in fact, if we take a closer look, it's just the opposite. Our raw experience is always unified, always one. And it is in fact an operation of the mind that separates it into parts. If we use the analogy of the ocean, the former perspective would be to see that there are waves first, and that then, having seen the wave, there is no really an ocean there. Having seen the wave, we imagine in our mind that there is an ocean. Whereas the latter view is, well, we see waves because there is the ocean. And we see the ocean because there is a totality of reality, out of which we abstract through an operation of the mind, the ocean in the same way as out of the ocean, through an operation of the mind of our imagination, we abstract, meaning we take out of the wave. To put it in learned terms, the view of science and the view of modern philosophy is analytical, whereas our experience is synthetic. So meditation could be described as a return to the synthetic experience, in which there are no parts, in which there is not an observed and an observed, in which there is not a thought versus a bodily sensation versus a sense perception, in which there is not the human body versus the universe, but one, always one, never two. It's for you to find out which one of these two descriptions matches your experience. Only you can tell which one is true to your experience. And then only you can have the audacity and the courage to stick to that truth once it has been discovered. You'll see that all arguments against this truth as experienced will be based on one implicit assumption, always. And this implicit assumption is the one of multiplicity. I mean, is the one that there are more than one thing. And of course, if you start a reasoning based upon this assumption, usually this assumption being made implicitly, at the end, you will end up with a conclusion which is consistent with the assumption, the hidden assumption you have made from the start. Allow for your thoughts to move freely in this space. Just as you allow for your bodily sensation to move freely. Regarding the sense perceptions, they always move freely on their own. So we can take them as an example and give the same freedom to our bodily sensations and to our thoughts that we give to the sounds we hear and the images we see. The reason is that regarding the sounds we hear and the images we see, we feel that we have no control over them. Whereas regarding our bodily sensations, and even more importantly, our thoughts, we believe that we have some control or a lot of control over those perceptions. Trying to control those is swimming against the flow. Against the spontaneity of life. In whatever you do, minimize the effort, the resistance. That's the teaching of martial arts for those who practice this. The fencer minimizes the movement of his sword in order to be faster, more economical. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Francis.